trends wise, as I've said in different forums, right? I mean, the first thing is that there, the consumer is undergoing a huge amount of socio-economic stress. Now, stress which is not necessarily distress, right? But a level of stress because there's change in the way they were consuming products and services, and they were used to consuming products and services. So that pattern has been massively disrupted, because of compulsion or because of preference, but an external stimuli has driven that. Now, what that has done is, when you have such external stimuli, sometimes they are for a very short period, which means that you can revert back to normal quite quickly. And I say, if I look at the period of the uptick in demonetization period of digital payments, that was a limited period stimuli, right? Because then, as the markets went back to normal behaviors, people went back to normal payment patterns. Yes, there was an uptick in digital payment, but it wasn't quite a sustainable one. Now, this is a period where that external stimuli, though a negative external stimuli, is disrupting consumption and behavior patterns over such a long period that all research generally suggests that a whole number of these behavior patterns are irreversible, right? So the first important thing is that we are now in a period that they're going to be change in customer behavior that is, to be fair, along predictable lines, but a predictable line which was showing a gradual change, which has just went, many-fold, faster. So that perspective, whether you are a manufacturer of manufacturer of goods or a provider of services, disruption, you will not be able to do that by tweaking of your business, or tinkering of your business. You will have to, what I call, reinvent your business model. Now, reinvention of business model requires, capital intensive investment, right? It is not about, I can slightly tweak my operating model and I can deliver what is a massive disruption in my customers' behavior pattern. So, in order to be relevant in the new disrupted preferences of the consumer, providers will have to reinvent. And sadly, this reinvention has to come with two paradoxes. Paradox number one is that there are stakeholders, which are your investors, your boards, your regulators, are expecting that while you are rapidly reinventing, you are staying heavily resilient. Now, that resilience is of multifold. Number one, that you are staying resilient in terms of capital adequacy, because, you can't predict, what kind of rise or fall in demand may lie ahead. So you must have capital adequacy while driving investment. That is one part of resilience. Second part of resilience, look, the consumer change that I'm talking about is obviously toward digital, which means that if you rapidly go towards digitization, you must have resilience of the security infrastructure. Because if you don't do that, then, because don't forget, security infrastructure can be time consuming. You want to be rapidly responding to the market. So that's the second kind of resilience that you show. Third kind of resilience is, you're not used to being a 24/7 organization. Your consumer had got certain patterns. I always like the example of, you're used to schedule programming as an internet provider. You are used to working your model to peak time. You are the industry. I mean, you're in the media industry altogether. You work on prime time basis. The running out of scheduled programming has meant that even the most ardent, couch consumer, if I can call it, of the prime time, has given up on the idea of prime time, and now understands and loves the convenience of being able to do the drop down and play when they want. So that is irreversible, which means that your underlying infrastructure, which is your technology infrastructure, has to be much more available and much more resilient than ever before, because you can't work on the basis that this is the period in which I want high resilience, and after that, there will be a lower volume period. That predictability is totally gone, right? I was giving an example of how, to a bank's technology infrastructure could be brought down by a surge in lottery buying, because the payment infrastructure is sitting with the bank, and a bank was not a bank doesn't design isn't used to designing its tech infrastructure on the basis of lottery patterns, right? Because so therefore, how do you ensure that you are infusing that level of resilience in your underlying technology infrastructure, and of course business model? Because don't forget that if there is high degree of transaction volume coming into your system, there is possibility of high degree of exceptions coming out of your systems, which means your customer services responses, your customer service patterns are also all disrupted. You are used to, as every organization, a predictable model of when customer interactions are high and when they are low. Those are gone. So how do you ensure that you have got customer systems that are highly elastic? And that's why I always talk about the third paradox, which is you want resilience, but you want elasticity. Resilience means that you got to hold it together, but you also want elasticity. Elasticity means that you can't say, okay, I will do the minimum. No, you have to do the maximum. The number of people who are calling during the lockdown period, wanting to know a little bit more about what's happening with their product, or the complaint about their product, the delivery of their product, that had gone through the roof. So on one hand, the paradox remained that you wanted the resilience, security of your employees, the health of your employees. On the other hand, you wanted them to be more available for your customers because you wanted to be empathetic to your customers. Now, all of this sadly has, in one sense, means that the last paradox is you must spend more capital into reinventing your business now, so that you can give better capital return on your business going forward. We've gone from a period, Noor, when people were thinking this is again a potentially small passing phase of a health distress, right? Not a socio or economic defining moment which will change the way we look at many things in life. So of course there's a massive change in that sense from 7 months back to now. People have, and which is both overt and not so overt, right? Because not so overt is you started to consume something in a way that was during that period, and you said, okay, I have no other option for a bit longer, please, and a bit longer. And today you feel like, okay, this is who I am now, right? I mean, I was ordering groceries, by going into the store. No, I'm not quite used to this, online consumption of groceries or consumables, or fashion retail for that matter, right? So my teams, for example, were used to, or were expected to go down to a site in a remote location if you are going to do revisiting of supply chain and redesign of plant infrastructure, because that's how today a lot of that is being done using Google Maps, and then what you're realizing is that when you in many ways, as professional trainers say, right, because you can't see yourself running on the treadmill, you can't quite figure out whether you're doing it right. But when you can get off it and see yourself, you can. So at times what we are now realizing is when you're in the plant and you're walking around, you can't get that bird's eye view that you can get from a satellite. So earlier, if we had said to a operations head of a big plant and say, hey, listen, mate, we will do this remotely by looking at it from multiple satellite views, it would have been perceived to be, well, you don't want to come here, or why can't you, and will you ever understand the realities if you don't? But today, when you look at it, they're not, on one hand, they're accepting because of some hard realities of the pandemic, but then they're realizing the value of it, because you are now looking at the same problem from a different perspective that you hadn't seen before. So technology consumption, I mean, earlier when we started, if you look at the global perspective, not only the India perspective, people knew that they have to now revisit quite drastically the resilience and availability of their entire digital infrastructure, because they knew that this is going to come under a much greater demand and consumption, right? But they were not quite willing to unleash the capital investment for the change that was required. But today, when you look at it, that is now becoming an absolutely accepted norm. And the question is not so much as whether I will do it, it is how quickly I will do it. So the whole because people understand, as an example, right, the ability to scale up and this elasticity that I spoke about, right, of your technology infrastructure, if you're doing that on-prem in your private infrastructure, is far more inhibitive and nigh impossible in terms of comparison when you put it on a public cloud infrastructure. So those are things that people were starting to envisage and contemplate in the first few weeks, which have now become a given, and only question is how organized can you be in adopting them. There are different lenses you can put on that question, right? First of all, when you look at change in ways of working, is what you highlighted, right? Whether you look at reverse migration or you look at working from home, then a different pattern of ways of working. That pattern is got a life cycle to go through, because where it started was the period of stealth. We shall not give up. Right? We are a society. Therefore we will stand by our families first. We stand by our corporations second, or employers second, and we stand by our customers third. So it was a stealth of not wanting to give up. But you can only drive certain thing by stealth up to a certain level. So as organizations, there is a massive opportunity to harness that resilience into the new ways of working. But then those new ways of working must be designed and adopted. We are not used to, in most organizations, collaborating digitally that well. We haven't invested in digital collaboration infrastructure to be able to do so, right? Because we all went on to Zoom call, right? Or we went on to a Teams call, right? And started to talk to each other. But that is not necessarily, that's not digital collaboration. Whether you are collaborating with your clients and your customers, or you internally. See, collaboration today has to be across boundaries with your ecosystem, your all stakeholders. When you were doing that earlier, you were doing that in office, you're bringing people, you're conducting workshops, you're doing multi-way conversations, you're sharing content, you're asking input on. Now, that infrastructure and getting used to working on that infrastructure requires hand-holding, requires training, requires figuring out how to do so. Right? So there is, as I said, the period of stealth and fighting for resilience is over. That period has unlocked opportunities, because what it has said is it has given people different perspective. Are there activities for which I do not want to incur travel? Are there activities for which I can absolutely, be more productive by working from location A versus location B, right? But then we were never that fluid in our location choices before, So if we are going to get that fluid, we must figure out how to invest in recreating structurally those new ways of working. Right? Which is your, as I said, your digital collaboration tools, which is new ways of working, new ways of organizing, so all of that will have to be done. If we don't do that, then this adrenaline is going to fade away slowly, and that will lead to a big drop in productivity, because, it's like, again, to think of an anomaly, you'll be using car anomaly, and that, combustion car anomaly is you put a massive V8 engine into a car that can only afford a 600cc engine. It's a waste. It is not going to work, right? It's just going to pull the car apart and blow it up.
Right.
So, and also, we will have to be realistic of our local context when we go about in this world of new ways of working. Why I'm saying that is let's face it, for a number of constituents of our workforce, remote working is not conducive yet, because some of them have lived in shared accommodations, right? Therefore, working on secure client-facing activities is not conducive. Others have had living arrangements which were only designed so that they were not, utilizing those, whether there was paying guest accommodations or other accommodations, right? That was not designed for 24/7 stay. So they it's not conducive for them. Let's face it, as parents, we hadn't designed our workday to have children at home and us at home, or 24/7 and work at the same time. So again, while stealth is over, it can't swing from stealth to non-contextual idealism, which is, don't worry, network is perfect, so surroundings are perfect, just get on with it because I've now given you enough tools on this machine of yours to conduct yourself. Not going to work, right? We are a country of such diverse weather types, as an example, right? Not everybody's got, temperature modulated households, to operate from. I don't want my workforce to be, in a staying surrounding that may be not 100% conducive. So again, opportunities exist, no questions asked. A lot of those opportunities will massively up productivity, but only if organizations step back, make the right investments in changing ways of working, investing in collaboration tools, and doing so keeping in context local surroundings and personal needs. See, let me again break the answer into two parts, right? First of all, let me acknowledge the reality that organizations will emerge from this situation in three buckets. Bucket A, organizations who were pretty strong and will come out feeling quite strong in terms of sufficiency of capital, non-damaged brand, and not a fundamental question to their market proposition. What I was offering, customers still demanding. My customer still likes me as a brand. I did not lose away capital, and by design or by accident during this period. So that's bucket one. There is a bucket two for whom any two of the three or some of the three may have come under a little bit of suspect. You may have been on an expansion spree, just before this, and all of a sudden this is bad timing. Your expansion models had not been implemented, and yet this has come in, and you could not implement your change. Right, you were in the middle of a storm because of some reason, and this has not allowed you to kill that storm. So there is a second bucket, and the third bucket is where you are in deep trouble because your investors have decided to walk away from it to a different safety haven, or where your proposition that you are offering has come under a fundamental question mark. Right, so those are three buckets. In case of bucket A, are the organizations that must plan investment to reinvent right now, because there is no sector, there is no part of the consumer preference that has not been disrupted. If you want to stay relevant, you will need to reinvent. How deep the required reinvention is the only question. You cannot reinvent by tinkering. You must reinvest to reinvent. So the first characteristic is if you're in the bucket one, you must be planning reinvention by reinvestment of capital. Number two, if you are in that bucket, you must make sure that you're increasing speed of decision making. There is going to be at sometimes an inherent sense that you can slow down decision making, but don't do that because the disruption on the customer preference has gone up multifold, as I said at the start, remember, right? It is not, you were planning, the world was planning for this speed of change. It has gone to that. If your decision making moves at this speed, the gap between your customer's preference and your reinvention is going to become bigger and bigger. So speed of change. Number three, as you asked me in the previous question, new ways of working, which means what? You are going to most likely than not be in as much physical presence of your colleagues or your employees or your bosses. So the trust factor in your colleagues will have to be much greater as a third characteristic. Because if you don't, when you're managing any change, and that to a change where you're used to physical presence to now becoming virtual, your trust in your colleagues to be able to manage that change, to deliver higher, that will have to be much greater. Okay. Now that's if you could easily accuse me to say, Piyush, this is an inward looking model of characteristics. And yes, I've got focus on, but then there's an outward looking model, which is, you must, if you are going to reinvent, make sure you're not losing sight of what you're reinventing to. How has your customer's preference been disrupted? Which means that you have to be highly data-driven, insightful organization. Because you can't rely on past historics, because none of the past historics are applicable. So can you have the ability to harvest existing data, the current data? Because also don't forget, past historics don't matter, is not only on past data, is your past instinct as well. Because you have grown up in this industry, developing certain instinct, looking at it in the past. Your customer has changed. His or her preferences have changed. So therefore, the ability to mine today's data to now reanalyze the new developed preferences. And last but not the least, in that our external world, then to say, how do I combine that new preferences with as much empathy for my customer? Because as I said at the start, everyone's customer is under stress. Not necessarily distress, but under stress. Somebody's relative is unwell, somebody's neighbor is unwell, somebody's friend is unwell, somebody's, people who have preferences of going out cannot go out. They have been locked in their house because somebody in their building is unwell. So there is a level of stress. So if we are not as organizations highly empathetic towards our customers, we will fail. Trust with employees, empathy with customers. Reinvention reinvention to be relevant in the customer space, but understanding where the customer has gone. So that, inward, outward balance will have, obviously, you have to reinvent from what the customer is. But that's the characteristics for the successful bucket, that's the characteristic I would be looking for. We will all have to become a far more technology-centric organization. And I'll take the organization perspective in this case, right? And therefore, and I've mentioned a number of these in the last few minutes, if you look at, so first of all, data, our ability to have data infrastructure so that we can consume, much greater amounts of data that are telling us about our customers' preferences, current moving preferences, and analyze from them what they would want from us. So there is a the trend or the investment point is all around data. Better quality data infrastructure, a better ability to churn out deeper analytics around our customers, and most importantly, which is a big weakness in the industry, to digitally consume the insight about that analytics is giving, because a number of our organizations have um, all got insights on our customers. They can't consume it. So I know exactly what you want, but I can't tell my sales system to offer you that when you come and talk to me. So pointless. That's why I mean, so digital transformation of my engagement systems, whether you want to call it, your channel systems, your customer management systems. So that's the other end of that. So data transformation of the digital engagement systems. That's the one part. Then, as I've said before, in order to build that resilience, making sure that you're moving your core systems to becoming cloud native systems. So the migration to cloud or cloud native systems, developing of new cloud native systems, that's the second area of investment. Moving away from on-prem, or as we call it, captive, data center, infrastructure to a public cloud infrastructure. Revamping your security infrastructure, so that you can have the ability to have all of this digital connectivity but happening through a digitally around a security layer that is protected and can't be breached. So that's the other thing. If you're going to have a highly flexible, cost base, adoption of AI to increasingly have an AI assisted workforce, right? So for example, if you're going to have unprecedented, plan for unprecedented increases and drops in customer volume of customer service, you must have AI assisted, customer services workforce, so that the AI can take care of some basic level of communication with you, while the human interaction is all about value added. Now again, the same pattern follows. Remember, AI must be supported by a data infrastructure. It must be hosted on a cloud native application. It must have security. So, the applications are the same. So the investment areas will still be all in the area of digital transformation of the channel systems, developing of new applied intelligence, to support your employee base, so you become an AI assisted organization. Development of cloud native infrastructure and migration to cloud for the non-cloud native infrastructure, and security systems that can protect you in this highly fluid digital world. I think what you've heard me say is couched in the trend, in the direction of trend that we are going, right? So, thankfully, and I can say that this with pride, we were ahead of the market in terms of the level of digitization of our own organization. Now we of course have upped that manyfold. So when I speak about new ways of working, right, we have unfolded a whole number of new tools that our colleagues are now using, even more so than ever before, for digital collaboration. Right, we were anyways further ahead, but this is now gone manyfold greater. Again, contextualization. Remember, I told you, a whole lot of policy initiatives to enable our colleagues to be able to create home of work environments, to be able to have that digitally assisted support at home, to be able to do that. Right, so that's also something that we are doing quite very, very active. Right, number three, how to use tools that were, as I said to you earlier, how can I use satellite mapping to work on remote plants that we were not doing earlier? That's something new we were customer zero in that sense, right? For ourselves, which is, okay, this is not an idea we're going to offer to our client. We're going to use it for ourselves and see how does it come out, right? So that's a, new data infrastructure. Again, we are customer zero. We are doing that to figure out how our customers' buying patterns are changing, and predicting that for ourselves, because we need to reinvent ourselves. Don't forget, it's not that everybody else is disrupted and I am in a protective bubble. I have to reinvent myself, right? We have to reinvent the organization. So we are the customer zero of doing customer insight on, analysis on our own client base. So yeah, I mean, by all means, and but the other thing also, don't forget, we've been quite vocal about it in terms of us being among the largest scale consumers of some of the collaboration platforms. Satya and Julie, I mean Satya, CEO of Microsoft, Julie, CEO of Accenture, have been on joint platforms talking about how we are the largest scale users of some of their collaboration platforms, right? So it's not just a question of customer one when you say, or say customer zero, as you said, when we're the first, but it's as important that we are the ones who've taken ourselves through that rapid scaling. So remember this to that. We are the ones who've done that. So we know what it takes to do that, and start to use that at a scale of global level that, when it comes to client base, I like to believe we are one of the few organizations where big global giants can turn to and say, hey, tell us how to do this.